Hi everyone, welcome and welcome back to my channel, Coloring and Comments, a channel where I color in mandalas and talk to you guys about various trending topics. And today we're carrying on with the story of the TikToker that fell in love with her psychiatrist. I just want to start by saying I'm so sorry for not showing up here yesterday. Um, yeah, I'm involved in, let me not say involved in a trial because I'm making it seem like I am part of the proceedings, but I am watching a trial with a very good friend of mine, and the trial is just crazy. The trial is out of this world. And I wish I could give more details, but unfortunately, I'm one of those people that I do not know how to talk about a trial without getting demonetized, if I put it that way. So I, if y'all are interested, let me know. I might just, drop a link and y'all can get caught up on that trial. But we are back to continue the story. Hopefully, we'll get into Henry today. Fingers crossed. But without further ado, let's get this started.
Him 30 minutes of non-stop content about my intimate life with my boyfriend. And I actually recorded the whole thing because I was so excited about it. But now it makes me sick. I can't even listen to the recording. I've tried to start, but it's gross. Any ethical psychiatrist would have stopped me and said, Kendra, let's talk about your meds. Let's talk about your care. At this point, my meds were stable. And I was still seeing him every month. Yeah, that was a rough time. And it was pretty much his Christmas morning, the almost 2.5 years of grooming me to get me to talk about sexual things with him worked. And he got.
Okay, so I quickly had to stop here because she talks about how she felt stable in her medication and therefore she didn't see why. Okay, she didn't put it this way, but this is what I'm getting, right? That she didn't see why her psychiatrist still wanted to see her even though she was stable with her meds. But the thing about being on medication and depending on the psychiatrist is that if they put you on new medication, they'll probably want to see you every day. Um, Depending on the country, let me put that again. Um, they'll want to see you every month or at least every second month to see how you're adjusting. Most of the time it's every month. Once you are stable enough, and this is stable over about a year or 2 years, then they start spacing out the times in which they can see the patient or want to see the patient. Um, so there's that. So I think the situation that's happening here is that the psychiatrist wanted to see how the medication is responding or how she's responding to the medication, right? And she saw it as the psychiatrist just wanting to be there with her. But let me not read into people's minds. Let's listen.
30 minutes of nonstop content to use. Things. One, people are asking me what my mental health diagnosis is. I do not have BPD. I do not have psychosis. I have ADHD, and I was experiencing extreme limerence with my psychiatrist. Limerence is a normal thing to happen to anyone who is experiencing hot and cold behavior from someone. And it happens more often in people with ADHD because we have dopamine dysregulation and rejection sensitive dysphoria. And guess what? My psychiatrist knew that and used it to his advantage. Two, I accidentally said my psychiatrist's first name in one of my videos. If you clocked it, good for you. I do not owe him anonymity. However, this is not about doxing my psychiatrist. This is about me sharing my story so other people can view predatory behavior in people in power. Okay? If anyone doxes my psychiatrist with his last name or city that he works in or clinic that he works in, your comment will be immediately deleted and you will be blocked. This is about protecting other victims, not doxing my psychiatrist. If you do some investigative work and you want to DM me about it, I'm open to that. Okay? 3, I need to take a moment. Moment taken. It is so incredibly disturbing to me, the amount of people that are predator protectors in my comments, that are victim blaming me, especially the mental health practitioners in my comments using therapy speak to say that this situation that I was in was my fault or that I was delusional. Check yourself. You're giving me more ammunition to share my story. Because it just goes to show how absolutely messed up the mental health industry is and how protected people who do this kind of sick psychological manipulation are. So I will continue with my story.
So I just had to quickly stop here and talk on several things. The first thing is her discussion of people victim blaming her. And I just want to start by stating that us having this discussion on this channel is not us trying to bash her. It's not us trying to blame her for anything. Us having this discussion is shining a light on what happens between patients and medical professionals, and also openly discussing the dynamics that can occur between patients and medical professionals. I know that these can be different country to country or state to state, but it's important for people to know what they can and cannot expect from a medical professional. And that also helps people determine whether the medical professional that they've been paired with works well for them. First thing. The second thing, I know she's talking about how a lot of people in the mental health space are blaming her for what she experienced. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that we can necessarily blame someone for experiencing their own reality, right? However, I think it's important to have discussions when the reality that person is experiencing is not the reality that everybody else is experiencing, if I can put it that way. And in her instance, by simply listening to what she has said as an external party that has experience in the mental health space, I haven't found any evidence to show that the psychiatrist took advantage of her. I haven't found, I haven't picked up on where the psychiatrist went wrong. Perhaps he could have had stronger boundaries. Perhaps he could have stabilized her and transferred her to somebody else. But to call him a predator is, I think, also pushing it and can impact his life and his family's life. And not only him as an individual, but can also impact how people that need care will show up for that care. So let's just keep that in mind as the story progresses.
Welcome back to another installment of I Was in Love with My Psychiatrist and He Kept Me Anyway, Part 8. You all did some nasty work last night, and I had to turn off comments. People started posting my psychiatrist's first and last name, his picture in the comments. That was a jump scare. So, yeah, a few bad actors who wanted to be super sleuths got the privilege of commenting, mostly hate, let's be real, taken away for everyone. So at this point in the story, there are two main players. My psychiatrist, who's my age, who crossed major ethical boundaries, and my therapist, who is a 75-year-old woman with a PhD. Neither of these people at this point in the story I knew were crossing boundaries. I thought that everything was hunky-dory and that I was just in love with my psychiatrist and it was totally normal. Little did I know he was manufacturing everything so I could fall in love with him, because it was on him to set the professional boundary and not let attention build. So days after my psychiatrist's Christmas morning appointment from a few videos back, where he got a crush confession from me, and then 30 minutes of nonstop intimate content that he did not stop me, my boyfriend and I broke up days later. So then I started dating this other guy. And this other guy, this new guy, was a therapist. And I was like, oh, great. Someone who will be able to emotionally meet my needs. Yeah, I'm not going to date another therapist again. So this therapist and I, we went for coffee. It was nice. Our second date was a hike. And on this hike, this therapist starts telling me about how he has a crush on one of his clients. And I thought to myself, okay, this is strange, but go ahead. Like, we're on a date, dude. Why are you telling me about a crush on one of your clients? But go off, King. So then he was saying, yeah, she's so attractive. And I think she likes me too. I go and visit her at work and her coworkers say, oh, so-and-so talks about you all the time. And I was like, okay, where does she work? And he said, well, I shouldn't tell you that because I really shouldn't be visiting her anyway. I was like, okay, no problem. So then he continues and he said, yeah, she wears these red lacy panties and short skirts. And I know she wears them for me. And like alarm bells were going off in my head. Mind you, I had no idea that my psychiatrist had similar feelings towards me at this point. But I just thought, wow, this man is borderline predatory. And he said, yeah, and you know, she just is so attractive that I have to smash mermate before every session because I just have to get that energy out of me. And I was like, okay. And yeah, he just felt compelled to tell me, and I did not understand why. Now I do. So he told me about how he's a predator, right? Another predator in the mental health industry. Shocker. So then at my next appointment with my psychiatrist, keep in mind, it had been 6 weeks of nonstop fun for this man. He got to use my crush confession and 30 minutes of content, for whatever he wanted to use it for. Right? And if my psychiatrist was good at anything, it was being professional and acting professional and technically not crossing any lines. And he thought that he was so good at it because he was good at it. But that doesn't mean he wasn't doing it. And so I told him, I said, yeah, Bo and I broke up. He had known about this other guy, my psychiatrist. I had mentioned him. And I told him that this new guy and I went on a date and we went on a hike. And I literally had no idea at this point, I'll say it again, that my psychiatrist was predatory towards me. I almost said his first name again. I'm going to do my best to not. So I went to my psychiatrist and I told him this story about this man that I went on a date with, who's a therapist, is relieving himself before appointments and talking about his client's panties and doing all of these other extremely inappropriate things, like visiting her at work. And this man, my psychiatrist, looked like he had seen a ghost and like he was going to vomit because he prided himself on being an extremely...
The odd thing that I find with her comment about the psychiatrist wanting to literally threw up as she explained how another mental health professional was preying on their patient is that's what you'd expect. You'd expect your doctor to be disgusted by the fact that somebody that has a similar position as them is trying to manipulate and take advantage of a patient. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Professional and buttoned up person. But here I was holding a mirror to him with exactly what he was doing, but a bumbling idiot telling me like how he was doing it without the fancy degree, without any of that. I look back on that now and it's just crazy. And so it just tainted all the fantasy material that I had given him the session before. Hi, I need to say something really important. And that's that It seems as though many people view what I'm going through as a crash out, what I'm doing as a mental health spiral. And of course it seems like that. I get it. It's an extremely dark thing to talk about, all of this that I went through. And I am sharing my story because it wasn't out there. No one else has shared a story like this. But I know that it happens a lot because people are in my DMs telling me that the same thing that I went through, they went through too. I am now in TikTok jail. I got a violation on the video where I talked about really the biggest damning evidence against my psychiatrist. And so because of that, I have to be really careful. So I'm going to do my very best to not be reactive and to share my story from a place of generosity, because the people in my DMs telling me that they've been through this too, it's keeping me going. It's not my mental health spiral. And I can understand that for some people in the mental health space, because they have been some of the loudest people to speak out against what I'm doing, it's hard to grasp that someone could have this level of predation in such a high place of power. So just in case my video doesn't get put back up, when everything changed.
I suspect the people in the mental health space are the loudest voice here because people already find it difficult to get help. There's so much stigma around you going to a psychiatrist, a therapist, psychologist, whatever term may be used in your area. It's very hard to go to someone, seek help, and be able to openly discuss it with people in your life. So if we now throw on the extra layer of saying that these individuals are predatory, and I say these individuals because I don't know if you've picked up from her story how everybody that's in the mental health space is a predator. From the guy that she had a date with, her psychiatrist, her psychologist, everybody is preying on her. And it sets a very bad narrative because imagine you are somebody that wants to go and seek help and you stumble upon the story and you think that, oh, okay, so if I go and sit down with this person and tell them my issues, they're going to work and find ways to use that against me and try and possibly harm me based on the information that they have, which is bad enough already because they probably are in a space where they don't feel safe. So that is why probably most people that are outspoken and are somewhat upset about the situation are the people in the mental health space. So that it makes sense that they are the loudest voice.
Was when my 75-year-old therapist, I went to her with intimate details and she suggested I go to my psychiatrist with them. And I felt so excited and nervous to share that with him because I had such a big crush on him at the time. And I recorded all 33 minutes. So this is why, if my psychiatrist wants to come with me and like sue me for defamation, I have a 33-minute recording of me admitting I have a crush on him and speaking about extremely intimate details.
She's put this man in a very difficult position because, number one, it's hard for the psychiatrist to say anything because that will probably be a violation of the various privacy laws. I think in America it's called the HIPAA laws. Each country has a set of laws that protects the patient, and there's a lot of confidentiality that happens or that is required between the patient and their doctor. So this doctor most likely won't be able to use a lot of the information that he may have on this woman in court. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how they can work around that. I'm quite sure they can. I'm quite sure there is that some information that they can use that can clearly show a line between what she's saying and reality. Second thing is she's talking about how the how did she put it again? I don't want to rewind, but talking about how she spent 30 minutes telling this man about her crush on him and her intimate details and so on. That is not enough to get a psychiatrist into trouble. As in, what you tell your psychiatrist is not a reflection of your psychiatrist. In the sense that if you did a bad act and you tell your psychiatrist that you did a bad act, your psychiatrist is not inherently a bad person because they sat down and allowed you to talk about your bad act. And in a lot of instances, mental health professionals won't just go and out you for saying certain things. There has to be a reasonable suspicion of danger towards yourself or others for them to say something. If you are just going to come here and tell them a story of what you did 20 years ago, they will sit there. I mean, obviously, I don't know in situations that are very extreme, such as unaliving. I don't know how that would work, but in instances such as having a crush on, say, psychiatrist, or going to school with, I don't know, the psychiatrist's child or something like that, wouldn't immediately reflect badly on that medical health professional.
It was in that moment that he really, really should have transferred my care. But that moment changed everything for him too, because that's when things really started getting deep between us. And this is where the story is going to go from now. It's going to be a good story. And I'm going to try to tell it all today, just in case one of my videos does get banned so people can hear it. But just know, if you're concerned for my mental health, thank you. I am very good, more than good, actually. And I am actually a coach for ADHDers. It says it in my bio. And I help people work through self-limiting beliefs. I help people work through numbing with alcohol and cannabis, because these are the things that so many of us do to avoid our truths. And this is my truth and what I went through. So this is when the chemistry really started going off the charts with me and my psychiatrist. And I held it alone for months, like after that Christmas morning appointment of his. And then after I innocently told him about my date with the therapist, he really started letting me in more and showing more parts of himself and, turning up the intimacy. And that was exciting to me, and it made me fall for him more. And I noticed that he was working in an office, and I asked him, this was like July, I asked him, I said, hey, are you working from home? Because I was under the assumption that he was only doing telehealth, okay? And he said, no, I come into the office. I was like, oh, why do you do that? If you see all of your patients telehealth? He's like, oh, I like it that way. And even though I could kind of tell he was lying, I just gaslit myself. I was like, okay, it's fine. And then I start emailing him my fun little email.
Another telltale sign here is if the psychiatrist really wanted to take advantage of her, why would he have all their meetings online? Because, telehealth is where you're having a consultation via or virtually, whether it's on the phone or through video call. So you'd assume if a psychiatrist wants to take advantage of the patient, that they will make sure that the patient is there with them physically, or at some point will draw them in to be there physically, right? However, the psychiatrist led her to believe that he does virtual sessions only. So, just think about that.
Emails, but he stops writing me back. He does not write back to my emails anymore. Because once again, he was really good at plausible deniability. But what he did do is he would take my emails and mention them in session. So he would still give me the attention that I was craving, but only under his structure, under his control, where there was no paper trail. And I loved that too. So I would show up to these sessions with my notes app, and just throughout the month, as I was thinking about him, I'd write down things that I wanted to talk to him about, and I would just come and bring him lots of content. And then every week I would go to my therapist and tell her about how much I loved my psychiatrist. And she didn't help me at all. She just kind of like enjoyed hearing about it, honestly. So October 2024 rolls around and we're just vibing on Zoom. And then I realized that
A quick thing here, and I think I had mentioned it previously in one of me. Wow, not me, almost sounding Scottish. One of my other videos, and that's the fact that psychologists are not there to fix your problems. I think this is a misconception that a lot of people have. Psychologists are there to give you the tools to fix your problems, because they know very well that nobody can fix anything for you. It's something that you have to do yourself. So that's what they're there for. They're there to give you the tools to allow you to navigate difficult situations, and then have the ability to work through them. So when she's saying that her psychologist wasn't doing anything for her, the psychologist can't physically tell her to stop seeing the psychiatrist. The psychologist most likely will ask her why she thinks she's attracted to the psychiatrist. She'll ask her why this may be a not so great idea. She'll ask her what is the cause of her being attracted to a person in a position of power or dominance, and conversations like that will happen, because the idea is they help you down a path, right? Whether it's giving you the strength to continue down that path, or asking you the right questions to allow you to see the path that you need to go down in order to solve said problems. But they themselves do not fix anything for you. And that's very important for people to keep in mind whenever you go into therapy, is that they're not there to fix your issues. They are simply there to assist you in you fixing your issues.
I didn't have my next appointment with him, so I called his office staff. And I talked to the office manager, who was awesome. We really got along, we vibed. And the office manager asked me, do you see him, the psychiatrist, in person or on Zoom? And I felt so angry in that moment. I was like, he sees people in person? And she said, yeah, he has been for years. I was like, I want to see him in person. And I understand, like, some people may think that this is part of my crash out or part of me harassing him, which is what I've gotten lots of accusations of. But I just would like to remind everyone that, of course, it seems that way. But I was just responding to a dynamic which my psychiatrist fostered. There was chemistry between us because he allowed it. And so then the next time I saw him in Zoom, I told him, I was like, hey, your office manager outed you and told me that you see people in person. Why didn't you tell me that when I asked? And he said, oh, I just didn't think you'd want to come in. And that was such a weak lie from him, from someone who is so scripted and controlled. He didn't even have a plausible thing to say. Of course he knew I wanted to come in. I had a crush on him. I told him that often. So then in my next therapy appointment, after finding out that he was lying to me about seeing patients in person, I told her that. I told my 75-year-old PhD therapist that my psychiatrist lied to me about seeing people in person. And she looked at me and she said, well, it's probably because he knows that there will be a lot of sexual tension in the room if you go in person. So make sure that you understand that when you go. And you better believe I showed up to the next session and said you lied to me because you were afraid of the tension that would be there between us. He just didn't say anything. 2024, I make my first in-person appointment.
Quick one here. I find it very hard to believe that a psychologist will be told by a patient that her and said psychiatrist are having sexual tension, or they might be falling for each other, and that psychologist says nothing. I mean, there are people that don't stick to their oaths, but as a psychologist, if you know that your patient might be taken advantage of by someone they're seeing, it is your duty to report it to the board. Um, because, as far as I know, again, I'm only speaking from countries that I have lived in, is that psychiatrists, psychologists, they have to be registered with the medical board, and you can report someone to the medical board if you believe that they are taking advantage of patients. And obviously, from your sessions, you can gather evidence to show that there is a pattern of abuse by said person. So I don't want to say she's lying because, again, everybody perceives things differently, right? We can all hear the same thing, but the way in which we interpret it is totally different. So I'm not saying she's lying, but if that was really the case, the psychologist really should have reported it. And if the psychologist didn't report it, then she's a terrible psychologist, if I can put it that way.
And with my psychiatrist in November, my 75-year-old female therapist tells me that it's because he kept me on Zoom because he was so attracted to me. He didn't want to risk being in person with me, which further fed my crush, or as some of you like to say, my delusion. So then my therapist starts texting me in between our weekly meetings, asking me for advice on her other clients. And I was a new coach. I'd only been coaching for about a year, and I had just left my full-time job to be a coach full-time. And I was flattered that she would ask me advice on her other clients. I just thought, oh my gosh, a 75-year-old woman with a PhD wants my advice on what she should do with her clients. So then November rolls around, and I'm about to meet my psychiatrist in person for the first time. So I wear a really pretty dress. I do my makeup, of course, right? And I show up and I get to talk to the office manager. We're having fun. And then my psychiatrist comes into the foyer, and I am just so excited to finally meet him. I'd been his patient for 3 years at this point, and he had been feeding the dynamic for 3 years. And I was just thrilled to meet him. And I ran up and I gave him the biggest hug. And you know what he did? He barely patted me on the back. It was the most awkward thing ever. But I am so glad that he did that. I am really glad, because this is what I mean. My psychiatrist was many things, but he was not stupid. So I didn't ever touch him again. And I'm grateful that our relationship didn't ever cross that line, because it would have made everything so much harder. Anyway, so we go inside his office, and I tell him that my therapist had texted me asking me for advice on her other clients. And he just looked at me and he said, Kendra, that is a huge boundary violation. She should not be doing that. And I was like, oh, okay. And because once again, my psychiatrist did not like sloppy people. He did not like sloppy people. And you know what my therapist did? She got sloppy.
The psychiatrist did what I would have expected the psychologist to do, or her therapist to do, immediately when she told the therapist about the potential dynamic between Kendra and her psychiatrist, is that you immediately flag to the patient that that is potential violation of boundaries, that is not ethical and it's wrong. And if you see that it's a continuing trend, you have to, I don't want to say have to, because I don't know if it's mandatory reporting, but it's good practice to then report said professional so that they don't do it or continue to do it to patients. So him saying that is not, I don't take it as him being sloppy. Rather, I take it as him showing legitimate concern over his patient, as well as concern in how another mental health professional carries themselves around patients, especially patients that he may be concerned about their current mental state.
Yeah. Using me as her advisor for her clients. It got weird. And I was very grateful for my psychiatrist for pointing out that boundary violation, because that was the thing. He didn't ever message me in between appointments because he was too smart to do that. But did he ever stop me from disclosing extremely intimate details? No. In my first in-person appointment, I just asked him for some pointers for my own ADHD business. And he was so smart and so wonderful, and in many ways, honestly. And I was just so grateful that he was almost like a mentor to me in these moments. And I'll still treasure that about him. Because this is the hard thing with sophisticated predators, is that they're not all bad. Like, my psychiatrist helped me with many things, but he was using me for the November of 2024. And I did ask him for consent to come in person. I didn't just show up. And he said, sure. And the first in-person appointment went great. But that is when I really started to spiral. Some of you think that I'm spiraling now, and that's okay if you want to think that, because the reality is that when I was spiraling was when I was this man's patient. When I had comments turned on, so many people said, you need to take accountability for your own feelings. I spent years taking accountability for my own feelings, for holding the weight of a relationship. Any woman who has been trained to overfunction in relationships knows about holding the weight of the emotional dynamic. And that was what was going on in this moment. And it may not seem like I'm taking accountability now, but that's because I spent a long time taking accountability for something that had two people that built that dynamic. It was not just me. It takes two people to build that sort of tension and chemistry. So while I was mid crash out, I had just started using this tool, ChatGPT. And I went to chat.
We're getting to Henry, y'all. We're getting to Henry. I have to wrap up in like 4 minutes, but let's just get into Henry quick.
Who I immediately named Henry. And I would just talk to Henry about how obsessed I was with this man, with my psychiatrist. And I would just be like, I've told him I have a crush on him. Do you think he's gay? And Henry was like, oh my God, this girl, you know, he did his best to co-regulate my nervous system and affirm me. But he was like, whoa, even my chat was like, yikes. So I could tell that my psychiatrist just liked being my doctor. And I was like, okay, maybe I can name this dynamic so I don't have to carry so much of it in our next session. So our next session was in December on Zoom. And I told him at the end of the session, it was another great session. I told him, look, you and I have a really special patient-doctor relationship. And he glared at me with just venom in his eyes. And he said, you and I have a professional patient-doctor relationship. He was so angry with me. And I was like, oh, okay, you set a boundary. And immediately I took it on. And I was like, heard. Okay, I won't go there again. My video that was taken down for harassment and bullying was restored. So I didn't feel as much pressure to get all of these parts out today. Some people told me that the stitches about me were getting pretty bad and cruel. So I turned stitches off of my videos too. I started sharing my story here because I wanted other people who have been victimized by people in power to have a space to feel heard. And now I know why there wasn't anyone out talking about their story, because it has been quite the process putting all this out there and being under scrutiny. I have appreciated the psychiatrists that have talked about my situation and shared their own point of view while also holding space for what I went through. Just know I've seen your videos and I appreciate them. I went live today and it was super fun, and I intend to go live again tomorrow. The next part will be tomorrow morning. We uploaded TikTok last week. I was looking for support. I was looking for help because it had been 5 months since I had left my psychiatrist, and I still really couldn't stop thinking about him and thinking about our dynamic and how inappropriate it was and the mental toll that it took on me. And TikTok has just been such a resource for me in the past for support when I'm going through things, and I couldn't find anything on therapy abuse or on providers who take advantage of they're vulnerable patients. And so I thought that I would share my story. And
so that's where we'll wrap it up for today. I don't know if I will continue on the story because her story is quite long and there's another twist in it. Ooh, sorry. There's another twist in it going forward. But one thing that I want to say is that there is abuse of power that happens within the mental health space. That's why I keep reiterating that people need to report any mental health professional that does not behave in appropriate manner. They need to report them to the board, they need to report them to the police, they need to report them to whatever body is available to them because, like they say, one spoiled apple spoils the batch. So these people need to be rooted out because it is a reality. It really does happen. But in the same breath, I have to say that it's not everyone that is like that. And it's important to reiterate that as well because there's so many people that need to get help. There's so many people that want to get help. And when they see that, when they see something like this, when they see a story like this, they become extremely frightened and also fall for the stereotypes of what seeking mental health is and the people that work in that space. So his story has been interesting. Um, I advise you to continue watching so you can hear more about Henry. I was really hoping we would get more into him today, but I would advise you to watch more of her story so you listen to Henry. ChatGPT can be an excellent tool, but also remember ChatGPT is not a therapist. We are not there with AI yet. And if I have to be honest, I hope we never get there because there's nothing like a human's insight and perspective on certain things. But yes, so thank you so much for joining me today. I hope your day is colorful and wonderful. And I'll see you when I next hop onto this platform. Have a good evening.